Um, Despite the high-minded rhetoric from Republicans about the supposedly noble intentions behind bans and what they call critical race theory, progressives have suspected from the get-go that the whole thing is actually an exercise in censorship. This suspicion has been validated by the fact that the book targeted by Republican Glenn Youngkin's gubernatorial campaign in Virginia was the Pulitzer-winning classic beloved by Toni Morrison, or the fact that North Dakota's laws ban any material suggesting racism is not merely the product of learned individual bias or prejudice, but that racism is systemically embedded. As an language that objectively bans teaching the history of slavery or Jim Crow, or the fact that teachers in Texas booked their own critical race theory law to mean that they had to teach both sides of the Holocaust. One of the most prominent groups advocating for this heavy-handed censorship is the misleadingly named Moms for Liberty, which presents as a parents' rights group, is nothing more than a racist organization that's dedicated to banning books about Martin Luther King Jr. and replacing them with books that insist that there was no racial component to American slavery. And now that the New Hampshire branch of Moms for Liberty has taken it to the next level, as Insider reports, the group is offering a $500 bounty to any person who reports a teacher supposedly breaking the law banning critical race theory. This bounty isn't just about a letter of the law, which is already confusing and contradictory. Considering that the Moms for Liberty's list of books that they want to be censored include those that teach the events like the March on Washington, Brown vs. Board of Education. By offering this type of bounty, they send a strong signal to teachers of New Hampshire that if they want to keep their jobs or at least not be harassed by the Republican activists, it would be wiser to simply avoid teaching any American history that touches on race or racism. So the kids will get Martin Luther King Day off from school, but the teachers will be afraid to tell the kids why that they're getting that day off. As Greg Sargent of the Washington Post writes, these poorly worded critical race theory laws could chill the teaching of that full truth by causing teachers to fear parents, arguing that recounting history itself creates heretical impressions. And indeed, there's no way around it, as Jim Crow and legal slavery are the very definition of the systems of racism, which is now banned from being talked about in multiple states. It's all very Stasi-like, right down to using the fear of being turned in by your neighbors to keep people from even talking about topics that the right wants to forbid. Indeed, one of the main selling points of the Republican march towards fascism for its base is the fantasy of a society where people live in abject terror of the Republican neighbors, afraid to express progressive opinions or even to admit historical facts about the United States. And that much is evident in the Republican base Klan rallying around Kyle Rittenhouse, who has been on trial for shooting 3 people at a Black Lives Matter protest last year, killing 2 of them. The case itself is mirrored in an often-moment debate about who started what violence with who at the protest, but that's not really the reason that Rittenhouse has become a Republican Nazi. He's become a cipher for widespread anger on the Republican side about the very existence of the Black Lives Matter protests and a desire to use violence to silence the anti-racist speech. If Rittenhouse is acquitted, it sends a signal to all the gun nut Republicans out there. It's cool to show up at a Black Lives Matter protest, unload the gun into somebody, which is of course about steering people out of showing up to a protest racism in the first place. People cannot freely express their speech rights when they fear for their lives. This is what Diana Palmer and Timothy Zick wrote at The Atlantic. The increased risk of violence from open carry is enough to have a meaningful chilling effect on citizens willing to participate in any political protest. That silencing is the underlying intent is evident. As somebody noted in the column yesterday about the fact that a number of Republican legislators have introduced and even passed laws that make it easy to get away with murdering the Democratic leaning protesters. So as long as you run them over with your car, there's a lot of hand waving about self-defense used to justify such awfulness. But the purpose is not exactly hard to see. This is about deputizing ordinary conservatards to express free speech with violence when the Constitution prevents the government from doing so directly. The connective tissue between the valorization of vigilante violence against progressive speech and the Texas bounty hunter abortion law is not hard to fucking see. As Jill Filipovich had argued in her newsletter, the law is the codification of anti-abortion terroristic tactics, and it's rooted in the same urge to publicly shame and humiliate women and the impulse toward vigilantism and violence that drives anti-choice protesters to stake out abortion clinics to heckle the people going inside, or worse, as the long history of anti-choice violence demonstrates. That longing from the Republicans to police and abuse their neighbors isn't the only thing that abortion bans have in common with book banning to combat critical race theory and the Rittenhouse-style intimidation tactics. The Republicans has long used the touchy subject of abortion as a place to field test their ugliest ideas, and that extends very much to the Republican war on free speech. Under Donald Trump, the Department of Health and Human Services banned doctors at clinics that receive federal funds from even mentioning abortion to patients. As with the critical race theory laws that intimidate teachers from even talking about slavery or Jim Crow, the abortion gag rule was about creating a Stasi-like environment at public health clinics where doctors feared even mentioning abortion to patients, even when patients even asked for it, out of fear that they might be rattled out to the government. The current President Joe Biden's administration thankfully repealed the gag order, allowing doctors once again to direct their patients who want abortion to save options. But the template for the Republicans' war on free speech has been fixed. Republicans use the hot button issues of race and sexuality to create oppressive environments where people like teachers or doctors refrain from speaking even basic truths. And this makes ordinary people afraid to go to an anti-racism protest for fear of getting shot at or run over by Republicans, whose murderous impulses are being validated by the courts or state governments. The goal is a society where everyone is looking over the shoulder all the time, scared that the malicious Republicans will make their lives hell for thought crimes like racism is real or women have a right to choose. It's the stuff of what is usually considered dystopian fiction, but for the Republicans, it is apparently what they hunger for America to look like. So if you like the video, give the video a like and subscribe to my channel, RBW King, and also hit the notification bell so that you'll be notified when a new video comes out, and thanks for listening.